Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to your helpful testimony earlier and reviewing what in writing, while reflecting a little on the immense amount of time this committee has devoted to health care, my feeling is that you have, as experts, done a much better job on diagnosis than on remedies. And I'm interested in hearing from you as to whether you have any specific prescriptions of what you think we should do. I expect there are a number of things you think we should not do, but is there any legislative action, is there any specific policy change that you would ask or urge this committee to pursue? This is the second hearing we've had this year on China. We are learning a lot more about the complex nature of the problem, the diagnosis, but what action specifically do you think the Congress should be taking? I'll address that to any of you who want to respond. Mr. Wolf?
If you're going to do one thing, I would think funding research into what is taking place in China, understanding what is taking place there, would be a major step forward. In terms of remedies, it's difficult to do anything short-term except for dealing with problems individually. A number of folks have talked about being more aggressive in our trade policy with respect to building trade alliances, in effect, in Southeast Asia, in the rest of Asia. I think we ought to be doing that. I don't sense that Vietnam wants to become a colony of China. The last war Vietnam had was not with us. It was with China. And I think that a number of countries are going to become quite wary, as they were wary of being too dependent upon us. They're wary about being too dependent upon China. So I think we have to be active. We have to be out there.
Thank you.
And we're not.
Dr. Merck?
I would associate myself with those remarks and would also say that I think you put your finger on a problem, which is that the responses that are required from the U.S. government and the private sector are not primarily legislative. But what this committee did at the end of March in its hearing record on currency was enormously useful for guiding not only the administration, but a much broader segment of players that have an interest in this. And I think this hearing record will also provide a useful record. The ITC has launched an investigation with hearings yesterday into indigenous innovation and IPR issues that will produce 2 reports, and I think that will be useful as well. So I would say that the most helpful thing from the point of view of congressional action is more in the hearing and study and kind of analytical end of the spectrum.
Let me add another question if either of you want to expand on that, and I'll call Mr. Freeman next, and that is whether you believe the Honda strike is an aberration or whether it signals any change in the role of any type of independent labor movement and any impact that might have on Chinese wages. Mr. Freeman?
I think it's certainly a bit of a sea change in terms of Chinese wage increases. The productivity has outpaced wages in China for quite some time. Productivity is the big story of Chinese growth, I would argue. So I do think that whether or not it leads to an independent labor movement, I think it certainly is an eye-opener. One of the challenges of some of the recent strikes has been that the official union was the one that was arguing for workers to go back to work.
Right.
And the workers were on their own. So I think if that wasn't a bit of an alarm bell, I don't know what was. Just to your question about what can the Congress do, I will submit humbly that the testimony here and the questions that have been raised at the hearing will be much more closely scrutinized in Beijing than they will here in the United States. I think China pays an awful lot of attention to what happens in this building, and I think it's absolutely critical that this committee and others play a leadership role in establishing the will of the American people. I'm not necessarily sure that legislation is the appropriate vehicle. I think the first principle is do no wrong. But in many cases, I think making sure that China understands what the Congress is thinking and its attitudes towards China is absolutely critical in order to allow both businesses and the administration to affect change within China. Our export market is still enormously important to China's growth. Yes, they're moving to more domestic consumption. Yes, they're attempting to diversify export, but they need us. And so without us, I'm afraid that they're going to get extremely nervous.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Doggett, thank you for your excellent question.